So start the recording. So the objectives that I've got for today is we'll identify all of the add data options that you get. So this is things like how to add in phase change lines or event lines or even goals or putting all of your data in manually. So that's the first objective that we'll tackle. The next one is I'm going to show you how the phase change lines work. Same thing with the event lines and the goal lines, kind of how to set those up optimally. Next, we'll go through how to navigate phase change override options. And then we'll identify the distinction between first trial data versus all trial entry, because how you do things on your electronic data sheet and sessions is a little bit different than how you do things manually. And then to kind of finish off, we'll demonstrate all the different manual entry of the data collection types and kind of the ins and the outs of how to do that. So what I've got planned for you is a very short presentation, I think about 10 slides from here, and then we'll go right into that manual input. So we'll run through kind of the back end parts first. So the biggest question we get asked is why put data in manually when we have the sessions? Well, the great thing about manual data entry is you're able to put in a lot of archival data very quickly. You're also able to correct staff error, like, oh no, I accidentally put in a score at this and that was wrong. You know, it's very easy to come back in for the people who have can edit privileges on learning trees to come in and make any modifications as necessary, or even throw in those phase change lines if you need to. And also, manual data collection is really great for groups that aren't utilizing online data sheets because it allows you to put in all of your data very easily. So the very first thing you're going to see on anything that's, oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Let me go back. My bad. I'm so sorry about that. I had forgotten to share my screen. So just a quick run through of these objectives again is we're going to go through how to add data, how to identify the phase change event lines and goal lines, how to go through the phase change overrides, define the distinction between first trial and all data, and to demonstrate manual entry across all of the data collection types. So like we were going through the why input data manually, you know, for archival data, to correct staff error, and for groups not utilizing online data sheets. So the first thing that you're going to see when you put in data is this little plus button. So this little plus button on that widget, anything related to the direct data collection branches, anytime you click on this add data button, you're going to see these 4 options. So we'll go through each of them, but for right here, this first one, that's our manual data collection for things like percent correct or for rate or frequency or score. You're also able to add in phase change lines. Now, I put these little notes down here to make the distinction between a phase change line and event lines. So phase change lines are solid black lines, solid black vertical lines, whereas event lines for something like a medication change, we have listed as dashed purple lines. Now, goal lines right here, these are solid red lines that will run horizontally across your screen. So think aim stars for those, think goals. So the very first thing, going through the add a phase, is when you decide to click on that add a phase button, it brings you to this tab. You're able to very easily put in a phase change. You're able to identify, you know, what's the start date and the end date. If this is a single phase line, so right here, if it's a change of conditions, I'm just going to keep it at the same day. So I'm changing my intervention. I'm doing something different. You know, on April 26th, I started it, but you know, this is just an event change. So I'm just going to keep those dates the same. Now, if you did want to put in a date range instead, that's going to shade your graph a little bit. So you'll actually end up getting 2 phase change lines with a shaded piece right in the middle. So the next one, this is that difference between the phase change and the event lines. So you'll notice on this last one here, we've got a solid black line, whereas right here, the event lines are dashed in purple. And you'll notice that this example right here was a medication change. So whenever you click on the add event line, it takes you to this tab and you're able to do the same exact thing. You're able to add your event name, put in the date and time that you're recording it, any comments that you want tied to that entry, and then you're all good. So this last one, the aim star. So the sample that I've got on here is this line right across the screen. My goal is 100%. I want my learner to be doing this without any prompts, so I'm able to put my goal at whatever I want. So if it's something like percent correct, I'm just going to put 100 in there. You can put your achieve by date also. So right down here at the bottom, these are a little more relevant for the other types of data collection rather than the phase change lines and the event lines. So the add a target from goal and add a target goal plus add another, what this button will do is it will take you automatically right back to the graph. And when we start putting in some data, I'll show you kind of how this works. So think I'm just doing a one-off data point. I can add my target right there. It's going to throw in the graph and it'll take me right to the graph. Now this add a target goal plus add another, what that will do is it will take you back to the screen, which is this. So anytime that you hit the add a target goal and add another, it'll take you to this same exact screen and you're able to really rapidly put in your data points. Now, the next one that we'll go through is, just talking about the add data button in general. So I click on my add data button and it's asking me, the system's going to say, what phase is this? Is this a baseline phase or is this an intervention phase or generalization or maintenance? So anything depicted with these green checkbox and current phase, that's going to tell you this is what my data points currently are coded as. So if you've looked in your raw data history, if you've got your phase change lines falling automatically, you'll see some data points coded as baseline, some as intervention. This is just kind of the core of how criterion work. So what you'll do is you'll choose whatever phase that you want to put your data points in. Note that our system defaults everything to starting an intervention because we're figuring more people will come into this saying, you know what, I'm starting my goal right in intervention. So that's where we have the default. But if you did want to come in here and put in archival data, you'll click on this little baseline button, and then you'll be able to put in those data points, which is what this webinar is about. Now, right down here at the bottom, you're going to see set as current phase. What this does is overrides the current phase and drops in phase change lines for you automatically. So if I add in all my baseline data and I click, the little checkbox that says set as current, it'll drop in a phase change line for me. The data points will start being coded in that way, and I'll be able to put in data. So you'll notice this little other screenshot right here. If you were to click on any of these other phases, other than this one that says current phase, we're going to give you a warning. And the silly joke I like to share is, it's a very, very sad day when you accidentally put in 150 data points of intervention and you were supposed to have some coded as generalization and some have coded as maintenance. So if you were to click on baseline, add generalization, or add maintenance, that's outside of your current phase. So we're going to give you this little warning right here saying you're currently in intervention. That's what your data points are coded as. And if you put data points here, that could really screw things up for you. So we have that warning there for you. So the next piece. Now this is for every single data collection type you've got. You're able to independently score the date and time of when that entry was occurring. You're able to put comments that you'll see in the raw data history right in here, tied to that data point. And then we had kind of gone over this a little bit. Anytime you hit the graph data button, it's going to take you right back to the graph versus this graph data and add another. It will take you back to this screen. So let's see here. So I want to do a very, very quick overview of the data collection types and what you're going to see. So right on here, anything that's on this side, this is where you've got a y-axis of 0 to 100 versus anything on this side, the y-axis will automatically adjust for you. So for something like percent correct, when you're putting in data manually or even on sessions, you're going to get a plus or a minus. Either the learner got the target right or they got it wrong. In addition to the calculation of how many did they get right over how many times did I run a trial. Now, part 3 to that is you're able to independently code your prompts. You're able to say, I used a partial physical and it didn't work, and I used a full physical and it did. So with percent correct, you're able to code all of those prompts independently and see that all in the raw data history. The next one is percent independence. And with this one, you get 3 response modalities by default. You get independent, you get error, and you get no response. So with independent, the learner did it completely right. With error, they made a mistake. And with no response, you tried to occasion something and nothing happened. So the way that this is calculated by default is we're looking at the total number of times you hit independent or prompts over the total number. Now, the important piece here, I'm just going to go back. The important piece here is if you do have prompts tied to percent independent targets, you're able to say, you know what, I used a full verbal. I want this counted as a failed trial because I prompted it. And we'll go through that one a little bit later. The next one we've got is a task analysis. This is just, did they get the step right or did they get it wrong? And the way that we're calculating that is the same as the percent independent. The number of times you get it correct or coded with a prompt over the total number of steps. Now, if you decided that you didn't want prompts coded as correct, which is our default, you also have the option to code them as negative. Next one is time sampling. All you get is a plus or a minus. And the way that this is calculated is how many times was there an occurrence over the total amount of intervals that you were running. Next one we got here in our y-axis adjustment is for duration. So we've got a start and a stop timer. That's all we've got. But the way that we're tracking this is, are we looking at an event of a behavior? So just that small period of time that a behavior is occurring, or are we looking at the total duration? So for the electronic data sheets, that's either you start or stop, and depending on when you hit graph, it works the same way on the manual data collection piece. Now, rate is a little more complicated, so I have some samples that I'll show you, and that's a start and stop timer, so pretty much the same as duration in that regard, and then also a frequency clicker, which is the same as that one. So pretty much just combine these into one. So this is looking at the interval or the total session. So we're looking at how many times this is occurring across the amount of time we're testing. For frequency, we've got a plus or a minus. Either it happened or it didn't. Now, the only thing the minus button does is if you hit the plus button one too many times, you're able to reduce the number because we're looking at the total number of times this is occurring across the time we're taking data. But there isn't that data component that's tied there. Score right here, it's just going to give you a keypad, so you're able to type in the number that you've got. And again, the same thing with frequency. You're able to put in an event or the total. You just have multiple data points there. So, and the very, very last piece, we've got rating scale. So that's listed as a 0 to 5, and whatever you decide to hit the graph will be listed right there. So the very, very last thing I've got for you before we go into Learn and start playing around with this is making the distinction between first trial data and all trial data collection. So for first trial, so probe data, you're taking your first trial, you want that to hit the graph. So either the learner got it right or they got it wrong. So in sessions, and we'll address this too, in the sessions right now, that's when you use that graph first entry only button. And then once you take that first trial, you'll hit your graph button and you're all golden. Now, that's the distinction there between these two is for all trials, you still get your one datum, but you're not having to hit the graph button manually. All you have to do is take all of your trials, and then at the end of the session, you're able to close it out. So just looking at what hits the graph here. So I've got a little data set here. Learner got something right, they got it wrong, they got it right, they got it right, they got it right. If I'm doing something with first trial data, I'm only interested in this data, or in this trial right here, this plus. So they're going to get 100%, as opposed to all trials where it's going to calculate everything and I get 80%. So now I'm going to take you over to Learn. So I'm going to unshare my screen for 1 second. We'll start running through these. Okay, so let's see here. And then I will, I'm just seeing some of the questions. I will be able to get to those kind of near the end of this call. So I didn't forget about you. I'll be able to go and address those too. So are you all, let's see here. Let's make sure that you can still see, make sure you see the correct one. One moment. Just gonna share the screen. There we go. So now we should be good to go. Okay, cool. So the first one that we're gonna do is we're gonna play around with a percent correct goal. So the little button that we've got right here, this add data button, when we click on that, it brings us to this screen too. So in this case, we want to start putting in the percent correct data for something. So I hit add data. Notice that my current phase is already set to intervention. So when I click on intervention, if I wanted to change these phases, I could just click on these buttons, but I want to put in some intervention data. So when I click on intervention data, it gives me this. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so we can see that a little bit better. So with intervention, I have prompts tied to this already. So you notice I've got my full verbal, my partial verbal, and my phonemic. Now note, prompts aren't available on baseline. Prompts are only available on intervention. So let's say I've got my very, very first trial. So we're going to talk about coding of trials versus coding of out of. So this is the aggregation piece, but this has really, really precise measurement in that I'm able to code each individual trial with the relevant prompting hierarchy. So I ask my learner to label dog, and they get it wrong on the probe. Okay, let's try a phonemic cue. What is this? And the phonemic cue wasn't successful. Like, what is this? Daw. And oh, they got it. Yeah, they said dog. So it was successful at the partial verbal model. So with this percent correct, I'm able to independently code where my prompts were successful and where they were unsuccessful. Let's see here. So what's successful and what's unsuccessful? And then you're able to code the greater trial in general. For percent correct, I want to code this as a failed trial if I needed to use a prompt. So I'm just going to say that was incorrect. Notice it will automatically move to trial 2 for you. I say, what is this? And they say dog. Like, yeah, that's awesome. They got it correct. Let's try that again. So I say, what is this? They say dog. Perfect. Versus I say, what is this? Nothing, no response. I try the phonemic cue. I'm like, what's this? D? And they're like, oh, dog. Cool, golden. It was successful at the phonemic, but I'm still counting that as incorrect. So let's graph this because I've taken 4 trials. So when I hit graph data, it's going to take me right to the graph. It's going to throw it right there. So I got 50% because I was looking at the number of trials that they got completely correct. So the ones that I hit yes on. So when you click on the raw data, you're able to see this data point by itself. So the partial verbal, the phonemic, where things were successful. So if I was to hit add data again, I'm able to put in multiple data points very quickly. So let's just say we ran 3 trials, they got it correct, it was on the 4th, I'm able to add it, brings me back to that same screen. So very, very fast. I'm running things again, I ran 3 trials, it was on the 5th, and then graph and add another. So now you're able to put in data very, very, very quickly. So that is the trial view. The next one is out of. So out of will aggregate your data. So if you're not really interested in knowing, how many or which trials were correct and which trials were incorrect, or if you're running potentially hundreds of trials, you're able to say, you know what, I ran 100 math cards today and my learner got 98 of them right. I can just write in 98. Again, I'm in this out of section, graph it right away. Oh, total number of trials. Sorry, out of 100. So you're able to say the number of correct out of the total number. When I graph it, sorry about that. Please enter value. Looks like we're set up as 50. So they're getting 48. Cool. And when I hit graph, that will hit there too. So it makes things much, much faster. And then you're able to see the total score over the total number of trials that you ran. Let's see here. The very next one I've got is percent independent, and I will quick address some of the questions that we've got up on top. So let's see here. So the question that I've got is The question I have is that at times the green check mark will be on the intervention, but the baseline hasn't been entered yet. I usually have to override this. Oh, okay. So the reason for it being on intervention, because we addressed that a little bit earlier, but the reason that it's set up as intervention is that most groups will start things, they'll run their probe, and then they'll move right to intervention, which is why we have this defaulted. So if you did want to put in baseline data, you would need to override this phase. Here. Okay, so the next question I've got was about first trial data. And it said, for first trial data, your RBT has to know to graph right after the first trial. Otherwise, your data will be graphed. So yes, so with first trial data on sessions, you're going to take your very first trial and you will hit that graph button. So what you're telling the system there is, anytime you hit a graph button, so I guess in the sample here, anytime you hit the graph button here, or you hit the graph all, or the graph in session, that is what your data point becomes. So if you are doing something like first trial data, you will need to tell the system that, hey, this is what I want thrown on the data sheet. Let's see here. Okay, cool. So we will move to independence. And if you've got any other questions, feel free to shoot them my way. So for percent independence, when I click on add data for this one, it gives me a few different options. So for percent independent, your defaults that you've got are independent, no response, or error. Now, if you have criterion attached, so I attached some criterion on here on my edit tab, right down here, since I've got criterion on here, these will also be buttons for me on my percent independent branch that I'm able to code things. So percent independent is much, much faster data entry than the percent correct in the sense that you're able to select one thing. So trial number one, I'm looking if my learner can wash their hands. Hey, they did it right all by themselves. Or, I'm seeing if they'll wash their hands and, I'm trying to occasion this response and it's like, hey buddy, go wash your hands. That trial was a full verbal because the percent independent is going to track how independently is a learner doing a skill. So they washed their hands correctly. I said, go wash your hands. There was no response. Or I say, go wash your hands, and they brush their hair instead. That's an error. Or I'm using any type of prompt, like even brush, or brush, and they go brush their teeth. Like, hey, maybe that was a phonemic cue. So you're able to code each individual trial. Now you'll notice this little ticker over here, the left and the right. You can go back and look at every trial that you've already taken. So if I made a mistake here, it wasn't actually a no response. Before I hit graph, I'm able to just change it right there. So the moment that I hit my graph data, it's going to take me in there and I can see the same thing. I can see the number of corrects and the number of prompts that I used. Now, with the percent independent and also the task analysis, you'll notice that this is at 33%. But I took 6 trials. By default, the system will count anything with prompts as correct. But in most cases, what groups ask me is they say, you know what, Nick, we want this counted as negative. We want that if you're prompting the response, we want this counted as a failed trial. So for all of those targets that I put like the full verbal, the phonemic, and the error, all of those were coded as failed trials. So the next one that we'll come to is duration. And when I click on duration, wrong spot, sorry about that. When I click on duration and hit add data, it's going to ask you to put in your total time of the interval that you're running this. So for something, if I was looking at the duration of tantruming, let's say tantruming happened for 20 minutes and 5 seconds on yesterday. If I was manually putting in data, I'm able to graph that right away and it will appear right there. Now, you'll note, or one important note is that the entry for this is going to be in minutes and seconds. So if you wanted to do something like an hour or 2 hours, if a tantrum was that long of a duration, you would just put in 60 minutes, 0 seconds, and say, throw that right to the graph. Now, the really neat thing about the duration, so for these these data collection types that are not the 0 to 100 y-axis is you'll notice that it automatically adjusts the y-axis for you. So the percent correct, percent independent, task analysis, and time sampling, those are defaulted to 0 to 100. But everything else, so the duration and the rate and the score and frequency, well, the rating scale is 0 to 5, but these will all automatically adjust for you. So the next one that I've got is for task analysis. So when I'm putting task analysis data, we actually need to go and look at the back end of this first. So for task analysis, I have just 5 steps in here, and I'm going to code each of these independently. And notice that I also have prompts tied here also as well. So when I come in to put data in for task analyses, it's going to ask me about each step in the chain. So let's think making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You know, first step, did they go and get the peanut butter and jelly out of the refrigerator? Yeah, they did that great. It'll move to step 2. Step 2 is did they get out the bread? Yeah, they did it independently. Step 3, did they grab the knife? You know, oh, they needed a prompt to go and get the knife. So let's take a partial physical. But then step 4, you know, I need to show them how to spread things too. So we did partial physical for the remaining steps. Same thing, I'm able to go back and see how I coded each individual step. I'm able to put the date and time that was recorded. So let's say we did this, well, suppose that's in the future. So let's say we did this on Monday. I'm able to hit the graph button, and it's going to take me right there. And when I click on that, you'll notice that they got the first 2 steps as independent, and the remaining 3 steps as partial physical. Now, this is where that count prompts as negative comes in, because on this sample, I have it set up that prompts are counted as correct. But if you ever decided at some point that you wanted prompts counted as failed trials, it's that same thing. The edit, right down here at the bottom, count prompts as negative. I'm just going to check and see if there are any questions. Cool. So I'm going to show you an example of rate, because this is one of the more complicated data collection types we've got. So on the back end right here, you have this graphed interval display. So I'm going to change this to minute for a second. So on this graphed interval display, all that does is adjust what your y-axis looks like. So if you had it per hour, or per minute, per hour, per day, all that it's going to adjust is the y-axis. Now, right here, the visual display isn't going to change at all. It's the same exact data set, just viewed in a slightly different way. Now, the reason that I show this is the way that I had entered this data was 1 per minute, 2 per minute, and 3 per minute. But notice what happens when I change this to hour. So when I change this to hour, it's going to extrapolate that data, because since we calculate everything as rate per minute, what this override allows you to do is say, you know what, I only took data for this amount of time, extrapolate that data across what the interval would have been. So my data point of 1 per minute is now 60 per hour, 120 per hour, and 180 per hour. Now, there is one little warning that I'll put in here, and that's the graphed interval display of entire day. I assume that everyone's learners sleep, because when you look at what's going to happen here to the data point, that says there were 4,320 instances of the behavior, and I highly doubt that happens, because that was it was set up as 1 instance per minute, but this is if that was occurring every single minute across the entire 24 hours. So if you ever see really, really, really huge data points, that's probably why. And you'll play around a little bit with this graphed interval display, which is right here. So we'll put in one manually, so a more realistic a view of what this is. So for those of you who have like a 3-hour session, let's look at what that would be. So if I want to put in data for the last 3-hour sessions I've got, come and hit add data for my current phase. And let's say that in that 3-hour session, the behavior occurred 5 times. Let's see. Oh, did I click on? I gotta change this one. Sorry, set that up as the wrong data collection type. So let's change that to rate. Good to go. So when we look at rate, it's going to ask me how many times it happened. So it had 5 times, and it was in a 3-hour interval. So notice its defaults here to minutes. So I want to put in 180 minutes and 0 seconds. So if it's looking at 5 across the 180, and I hit graph, what that's going to appear as is 0.03 per minute, because that's what my minute display is set as. But in this case, I'm more interested in knowing, how many times is this happening in an hour? So it's going to divide by 3. So every single hour, it's happening about 1.7 times. So it's taking that 3-hour session and it's dividing it, and it's showing you what it would be in the interval that you're selecting. So I'll give you a second. Does anybody have any questions with how rate works? That it'll extrapolate data based on what you put in. Okay, so far so good. Okay, cool. The next one we've got is rating scale. So when I go into rating scale, it's going to ask me, is it 0? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? Or is it 5? And it's going to hit on that graph in the same way. So if you were doing something like a My Incredible 5-point scale, you're able to code all of these independently. So when I hit graph, it's going to appear right there as 5. The very next one we've got is score. So score works very, very similarly to frequency. With score, this gives you a keypad in sessions, but it will give you a little text box here to write in your number right here. So when I hit add data for this, I just put in the number. So how many times did this occur? Because there is no time component at all. So it happened 25 times in the session, and it happened on this date. And when I hit graph, it's going to appear right there. So the next one that I've got is time sampling. So let me show you a little bit of the back end of the time sampling. So when we go into time sampling, you'll set up your interval. So I've got a 5-minute interval, and I've got 10 of them, and I want to code each of these independently. So let's go into the add data section. So when I hit add data for an intervention, it's going to ask me, in my very first interval, because my very first interval is a 5-minute interval, did the behavior occur or did it not? Because all that we're really looking at here is, was this coded as a plus in this interval, or was this coded as a minus? So let's say this was something like stereotypic behavior. So was my learner hand flapping in this 5-minute interval? Yes or no? So it didn't occur there. I can go to the next trial. In 5 minutes, 10 minutes, was there stereotypic response? Yeah, there was. How about the next one? Did it occur in the 10 to 15-minute interval? Yes. So I won't go through all of them because I do have 10 of them set up, but when I hit graph, it's going to appear there as 67% of intervals, there was an occurrence. So there were 2 different areas here. That was entry by trial, but there's also entry by out of. So for this one, it's just asking for, of your 10 trials or of your 10 intervals that you have set up, how many occurrences were there? So with this one, you had to code each of them independently. But this one, you could just say, out of the 10 intervals, there was a stereotypic response in 9 of them. And then when you hit graph, and let me put this on a different day, it's going to give you 90%. Because it's looking at the total number of intervals that you hit plus versus the total number of intervals that you hit minus. So the last one that I've got right here is frequency. So adding in frequency data, it's going to just ask, plus or minus. So the only thing that minus does again is it says, you know what, I accidentally hit the plus one too many times, and I'm able to hit the minus, and then I'm able to score this right away. So let's put that on the 4th, my data point of 3. It's going to appear right there. So this is everything that I've got for the data collection types. Do we have any questions for these before we go into the entry of the phase change event lines and goals? Cool. So let's go to one of my test accounts, one of my fun ones, a behavior plan. So right here on this graph, what we've got is we've got some phase changes and we've got some event lines. So let's say, like right here, I'm going to do some other change, like I did my intervention, and now we're interacting with the learner every 30 minutes. So this is attention maintained hitting. It went down, and now things are going up a little bit. We want to do another training. So looks like we have to intervene. I'm going to talk with the parents and say, let's make sure we're still doing this intervention. So I want to put in a data point at the 28th of April. So let's say on the 28th of April, we did another intervention. So when I hit add data, I'm able to choose add a phase change line. So let's just say parent retraining. So I'm able to go in and say this occurred on the 27th. And I'm just saying this is a change to conditions. So I'm just going to add my event right away. And now you'll see my parent retraining right there. Let me just truncate just a little bit. I think I might have to make my screen a little bit smaller. Make it a little bit bigger because I've got my screen adjusted in. There we go. That's what I want to show you. So we've got our parent retraining right there with my phase change line. And let's put in a data point and we'll expand this just a little bit further. So we do parent retraining. We're going to add in a frequency data point. And let's say, we were at 0 levels on the 29th after our retraining. Let's add in another one. And let's say we were at 0 levels again. Let's do one more. So you can see it's very, very, very fast to put in archival data. Let's just do one more for good measure. There we go. So now I'll see all of my data points down there that after our parent retraining, we're at 0 levels across time. So that was running through how to add in phase change lines and that frequency. So let's do another sample. Let's say that there was another medication change or something like a divorce or the learner got injured at some point. Let's go on a different target. So right now we've gone through manual entry of phase change lines and event lines. But what's really neat that I like, what I think is really cool is, what if you want these to appear on every single graph? So what if there was a divorce in the family or some removal and you want this reflected on every single graph. So across behavior reduction, across skills of activity or activities of daily living, across all of your skill acquisition, because you've got big jump downs in your data and you want to show why. So if you come to the very, very top of your book, you're able to come right in here to branch options, and we have the option to bulk add phase change lines and bulk add events. So what I see this most often is if there was a medication change, I can add an event, and by starting this right at the very, very top at the binder level, I can have that fit on every single graph going down that is a data collection graph. So bulk add events, medication change. Let's say that it happened on Monday, and when I hit save, it says successfully added that to 83 branches in one fell swoop. So let's look at my manding for removal of an aversive. Boom, there's that medication change. How about my labeling of corgi? Once this loads, boom, there's that medication change. So it's very, very, very fast to put in phase change lines and event lines on every single graph in one fell swoop. Now you'll notice I did this right on the binders view. So by clicking there, it's right on the binder. But you can do this by branch too. So if I did a brand new intervention for the behavior reduction, maybe I only want that phase change line to appear on the behavior reduction graphs. So if this was something like training an alternative response to hitting, and I do a phase change line, so some functional communication. If I've got everything tiered under my behavior reduction, my functional communication and my aggression goal, I might just as well put the phase change line right on the long-term goal for behavior reduction, and that will be on all of those graphs. So it speeds things up quite a bit. So let's see here, the very, very last one. Let's make a brand new goal. So let's put in a goal line. So go hang out with the corgi for a second, and we will copy this one. So when I copy corgi, there aren't any data associated with that. So let's put in a goal. Let's say, you know what, we're working with a learner who likes seeing their own graphs, and they want to know what their goal is and when that goal is. So what we can do is when we hit the add data, we say, hey buddy, or hey Missy, what's your goal here? When do you want to learn this skill by? They're like, I want to learn it in a week. Okay, cool. So let's say by next Wednesday, you get 100%. Like, yeah, that sounds really fantastic. So by me saying that I want them to achieve 100% in a week, it's going to put an aim star right on my target. So by adding in the target goal, it'll put that 100% right across my graph. So let's put in the data. Let's see how they do on this. So today we're tracking it. I've got it starting in baseline. So today they get it wrong, unfortunately. I'm just doing probe data. So let's put it on today's and graph it. We've got our 0 data point, but then tomorrow they get it right. So when I hit add data and say, tomorrow they got it right. That was golden. We're able to graph it, and as they progress, we're going to see how they advance. So the cool thing here, and something that I'll add in on this branch, is criterions still work with the manual data collection. So I put in 2 baseline data points, but let's say, oh no, I want to actually put in a criterion. So let's copy this branch. Let's add a criterion right on corgi. So when I come right into corgi, so my cute little buddy right up there, my little corgi. So scrolling down here, I've already got my criterion here. So if I just want to start right in baseline, I'm just going to click right there just to kind of speed things up a little bit. And I'm going to use my fast one so you guys will see the phase change lines and the advancing. So I'm going to click right there. Notice this is set up as, if they get 100% over one data point, move to intervention. And if they get 100% again, move to maintenance. So this is the one that I display to show here's what criterion works and here's how it works with manual data collection. So we've got our blank goal. He had said that he wanted to have 100% in a week. So let's set that up one more time. So 100%, achieve in 1 week. And now let's put in some data. So I have this defaulted already to being in the intervention phase. So let's put in 1 data point. Like, he got it completely right on the first try. So we got it correct. I'm going to hit my graph data. You're going to notice a phase change line is going to get thrown in immediately because I had my intervention. He got his one data point at 100%. And let's track this again tomorrow. Let's see if he can move into the maintenance phase because that's why that drop in happened. So when I put in my data, it automatically moved to maintenance. And I'm able to say, yep, you got your data point as maintenance, and it automatically be coded, and the data point changes too. So if we go into the data history, you're able to see I set the goal, I started an intervention, they got 100%, it throws in the phase change line, and then it will move to maintenance, and they got 100% there also. So that is all that I've got for today. I did want to take a few moments to see if anybody had any other questions. And then one important note that I have for everybody is that our old sessions are going away. So here in the clinical, these old sessions that we've got, it won't take you to this default page anymore. It's going to take you right to our beta sessions, which is going to become our original sessions too. So does anybody have any questions for me? Or anything that you'd like to see one more time? Because I'm more than happy to go through rate one more time too. So while I wait for that, I'll show the rest of the PowerPoint, which I made kind of as a manual for Central Reach. So this will be available for you too, and it'll give you the ins and the outs, and it's pretty much just everything that we went through, but in a different view. So I'm going to go back to the presenter view. Let's share. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to unshare for 1 second. Let's see here. So I want to interview. Okay, cool. So what we had kind of run through, and I'll just show you the other pieces, just the view, and this will be available for everybody else. So the percent correct entry by trial, the percent correct entry by correct and incorrect. So coding all of those. That prompts are available only on intervention phases in the percent correct. How you put in duration. The steps to task analysis. Now this is only if you have prompts, so independent, no response and error. The 2 visuals I had for rate, so the 1 per minute, 2 per minute, and 3 per minute with the minute and hour display. How you put in the rating scale data. How you put in score, so manual entry. And then the backend setup of time sampling, so coding things by interval versus coding things by trial. And then frequency. So let's see here. So that, let's go back. That is all that I've got for you for today. So does anybody have any questions for me? Cool. Well, I'll hang around for the next few minutes. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be able to address those or go over anything else. But thank you all for coming.